Good evening, Dolphins fans. Welcome to another episode here of On the FinSide with Kat and Paul. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, all of our social media outlets, as well as the Fansided Network and FinFanatic.com. I'm Brian Cat, NFL. Paul is Fanatic_pick. The Dolphins lose their third straight to the Vikings in Miami yesterday. I had a family commitment, so my apologies for not being able to jump on here later that night. It's given us a day to decompress here. Not a lot of decompression on my end. I'm still pretty angry about the entire situation. So the thing that jumps out the most, Paul, look, and the Dolphins have been through a lot of crap in the last couple of weeks, especially at the quarterback position. I can't help but also notice that the Dolphins seem to dig themselves out of the crap. They get shell-shocked. Then they dig themselves out of it. They get their feet underneath themselves, and then they blow it in the fourth quarter. We saw it a couple of weeks ago against the Bengals. It's Teddy Bridgewater's driving with a few minutes left. Chance to win the game, throws an interception. The Dolphins are about to go ahead against the Jets last week. Jason Sanders misses a field goal. Everything falls apart. And then this week here, the Dolphins go from 16-3 down to driving for what should be the game-winning field goal or game-winning touchdown. Jalen Waddle, one of the most dependable, talented players on the team, fumbles the ball. So it's frustrating, even though the Dolphins have been through a lot of stuff the last couple of weeks.
I am not in panic mode. We get Tua back next week by all accounts. I think that Skylar Thompson should be the backup moving forward. I thought he looked a lot better in this game than what we saw from Teddy. I thought Teddy showed zero pocket awareness in this game. I thought there were a lot of moments that were atrocious from Teddy, and there were some bright spots. One bright spot, I will say, as much crap as I've given Noah Igbenogany, and it's nice to have us where we can pronounce his name as opposed to the folks on the broadcast. I thought Noah actually looked decent after that weak pass interference penalty. I thought he actually looked okay, which surprised me in that he put himself in position to potentially make a few interceptions. He didn't pull them in. Xavier Howard got burned a few times, but he's coming back from a groin injury. Tyreek looked like Tyreek again. I liked what I saw from Raheem Mostert overall, even though he wasn't as effective as the week before. The O-line was spotty, but we're starting somebody from the practice squad right now.
I think spotty is putting it nicely when it comes to Greg Little, who I don't want anywhere close to the building again.
Go ahead. Real quick on that though too. It's Greg Little had a rough game, but he was going against some good players, and Brandon Shell had a rough game, but we don't expect we don't expect Shell to be the be all end all at the position. He's a filler right now. So without Teron Armstead, Robert Hunt had a bit of a tough game for him, but I see the light at the end of the tunnel here, and I think Miami gets back on track.
Well, they're heading into they play Sunday Night Football against the Steelers next week. Already a touchdown favorite. So Tua's coming back, and Teron Armstead almost played in this game. I hope it was a little further than almost, because if it was really close, then I wish that he would have, because look, I thought Brandon Shell played fine at right tackle. He had a couple of pressures. Greg Little was unplayable. I have looked at Austin Jackson's game against the Broncos in 2020, the game where Tua was yanked from, was the worst game I've ever seen an offensive lineman play. Greg Little topped that here in this game. To have 9 pressures, and that's only when you had an opportunity to have the quarterback pressured. And what gave up 3 sacks, and at a certain point, or in the last sack by Zadarius Smith, the announcer on there just paused and said, "This is abuse." And it was embarrassing. And look, Teddy Bridgewater, I I felt like there was absolutely no energy coming from him or the offense in the first quarter. I had an issue with that. And I felt Skylar Thompson did a good job to start out with, who was absolutely betrayed. The Dolphins quarterbacks threw for 418 yards in this game and had another 65 yards called back on penalties on one drive. So I don't have a problem with the way that the quarterbacks played, especially with Teddy's slow start. But yeah, I can, when things go bad, I can understand why anybody would think this is lifeless.
Well, and the thing that people have to remember is the O-line did not play great. Teddy did them no favors when he was in there. It was amazing to me just how little awareness it felt like he had in moments. And, how many times can you hold the ball too long, throw an intentional grounding penalty in a 2-week span? Shouldn't be many. And then one of the things a lot of people forget about with the offensive line is the quarterback makes a couple of calls that adjust where the protection is. And it wouldn't shock me if Teddy did a piss poor job of that based on his awareness in all other areas in this game.
I felt very simply that Bridgewater in the third quarter, he learned to step up in the pocket. And I don't know if that's trust with the offensive line. I don't know if it's, just shaking everything off with, having left the game early last week and then being put in the middle of this week. But the frustrating thing, Paul, is that the Dolphins get down 16-3. They're moving the ball on offense. They're making mistake after mistake after mistake, but they get into the fourth quarter and you have that long touchdown capped by Mike Gesicki's first TD of the game. Dolphins have a 3-and-out where Justin Bethel stops Adam Thielen on that to force a 4th and 1. They go 3-and-out again. They punt. Dolphins get the ball back. The Vikings are playing on a sideline where it's 122 degrees. And you've got wide receivers running wide open all over the field. And on a 3rd and 15, connects with Jalen Waddle, fumbles the ball. I felt it's hard to bash the guy, but those are 2 turnovers. It's two. Yeah. I mean, 2 turnovers that a wide receiver is responsible for. Right before the half, Bridgewater throws a perfect pass to him. Hits off his shoulder, hits off 2 defenders have both hands on the football before it goes to the ground, pop the football up. It hits off like 9 different guys' body parts and they still come away with it. But it's Waddle's fault. That puts 3 points on the board for the Vikings. It's 10-3 going into halftime. And then you've got the play at the end where, let's take the 3 points off the board. It's 13-3. Dolphins come back, make it 13. They would have made it 13-10. And then Waddle would have fumbled the game-winning potential field goal away. So you're talking about basically taking 10 points off the board for the offense here in a pretty low-scoring game.
Yeah, you are. I thought a few of the penalties were ticky-tack. But again, I still was not enamored with Bridgewater's game in this one. I saw enough in this game to feel like Skylar should be the backup when everybody's healthy. I thought he had better command of the offense. I thought he had better energy on the field. I thought the protections were better, which is part of, they weren't great, but they were better, which leads me to believe that some of the issues had to do with Teddy Bridgewater adjusting the protections. And again, it's Waddle. Sure, he had a not great game. We'll go with, but there were some bright spots. I thought the defensive line looked good in this game. I thought that there was
and let's hang on for a second just with the defense. Okay, because we're going to be all over the place. Let's stick with the quarterbacks for just before we get into Bridgewater. Even before Bridgewater gets on the field, just going back to that one drive where, the Dolphins, the first drive, the Dolphins march right down the field and get to the 34-yard line. And so they're in close to field goal range, maybe not field goal range. We'll get to that in a minute. And then they get sacked out of field goal range. Watch the replay of that play. It's a simple twist play. Greg Little and Liam Eichenberg make that whole play look like a car accident. It's embarrassing. And then, so they punt the ball away. Next drive, they punt it away again after moving the ball a few times. But on the third drive was the really comedic part. You have a 30-yard catch by Waddle, 16-yard run by Mostert, 9-yard catch by Hill. Then you've got 5 penalties on one drive. One by Hunt, a false start, a illegal man downfield on Connor Williams on a 2nd and 15 where Sherfield catches it. Where in 2 seconds, Connor Williams found a way to just lollygag down the field. Then you had the Eichenberg hold, the in-goal ticky-tacky pass interference, and then the Sherfield hold as well. So, I mean, you're talking about 65 yards of penalties on one drive that took at least 3 points off the board. So after that, you had Teddy Bridgewater, and we've talked about him. Anyway, go ahead and go right ahead with defensively what you were going to say.
Since you brought that stuff up, one thing too, and this is one thing I did agree with the commentators on in this game. When you're running an RPO-based offense and you've got a 7th-round rookie leading it, there are going to be times, and there is a danger that you are going to take too long to make the decision to throw the ball. And it's going to be a situation where you throw the ball and the line releases because they think it's at a certain point in time. And that is one of the dangers of running any type of RPO system.
I agree with you there. I timed the illegal man downfield by Connor Williams from the snap that Skylar Thompson got the ball to the point where he released it, 1.9 seconds. So I agree with what you say as a theory. I just don't know what the hell the guy's doing after 1.9 seconds on a 20-yard pass where the receiver's wide open. It doesn't make any sense to me. But I understand what you're saying as a concept.
Yeah, and it's there was another one. I think Rob Hunt was downfield, or who was it? Was it Hunt?
No, that was last game.
Okay.
But Hunt did have 2 penalties. So just to put that in perspective, Connor Williams and Robert Hunt, who overall I like very much as interior linemen here, 3 penalties in the game. Just put that in perspective. The Vikings as a team had 2. And the Dolphins have 10 penalties. Vikings have 2. Dolphins have 3 turnovers. The Vikings have 0. The Vikings didn't do anything special in this game, and that's what's frustrating for the Dolphins to have 418 yards passing from their backup quarterbacks and another 80-something running, 500 yards or so total offense. The Vikings have 250, 235, 250, somewhere around there, and end up winning. It's like the reverse of when the Dolphins beat the Bills.
Yeah. No, and it is. And, I like that play where Skylar Thompson took off with the ball. I think that we would have seen a little bit more of that throughout the game because there were a lot of opportunities for that. I thought there were a couple plays Teddy should have taken off with it. But, before we actually move on to the defense, it's there are a couple things in chat I just want to jump to because I know you've talked a little bit on Twitter about some of the options that are out there in the trade market right now. There's multiple options at cornerback right now that could be brought in. And then there's rumors Taylor Moton might be on the market. And that would be a heck of a get for this offensive line if we want to continue to try to make a playoff push when Tua returns.
A Cap for Life in chat asks, is this offensive line worse than last year's? And if so, what's your grade of the offensive line for Applebaum? Well, I don't think it's a coincidence that every offensive line coach that comes in here isn't good enough because you can't make chicken salad out of chicken you-know-what. I mean, look, just watch Greg Little on an island yesterday trying to block people and just ask yourself, what the hell is an offensive line coach supposed to do with that? Liam Eichenberg, it's embarrassing that he's still in. And then at right tackle, Brandon Shell, you pull off the street, he looks like the 3rd best lineman you have. So my hope moving forward is you get Armstead back. If he was close to playing, hopefully he gets back and is able to continue starting at the left tackle spot. Anyone who says that the Dolphins would have won this game with Tua, I don't agree with that. I do think they may have won this game with Armstead, though, with how bad Greg Little played.
If they had Tua and Armstead, I think the Dolphins win this one handily. I do. I don't see Tua making some of the the mistakes that we saw in this game. And I see Tua hitting more of the open receivers in this game, even with the mistakes that we saw on the field. But again, we get Tua back this week. We hopefully get Armstead back this week. Corner scares me right now with Igbenogany, even though I saw progress this week for the first time. I don't love where the corner position is at. And one thing we have not touched on the offense yet was Mike Gesicki looked like he had a little bit of a resurgence there as this game went on.
He did, and he was one of the people running wide open against a Vikings defense that was huffing and puffing. Just to put it in perspective, Hill and Waddle had a combined 306 receiving yards. With 2 minutes left in the game, Hill and Waddle had 306 receiving yards, and the Dolphins had 10 points on the board. That just shows the amount of – that's what happens when you turn the ball over 3 times and commit 10 penalties. And not to mention with the turnovers too, you also had the fake punt by Fedulum, who ran around the edge, looked like he had the first down, leapt for the first down, but didn't have the ball. A Clayton Fedulum specialty right there.
You're really
welcome back, buddy. Right. Oh man.
Ugh.
But here, I'll tell you what. Here's the promising thing on offense. This is not like years past where the offense was inept. Okay, where it was boring. Where I looked at the offense and they'd score 16 points, and I look at him and say, I don't think they're capable of more. When they had Ryan Tannehill, when they had Chad Henne, I see a game like this where you put up 500 yards and you it's a minute and a half left in the game where you get more than 10 points on the board. So that's the promising thing moving forward. I still don't think people can cover these receivers. I don't think we've seen that all year. So that's the encouraging thing, especially when you get Tua and Armstead back.
Oh, it absolutely is. These receivers are phenomenal. I can't recall a season where I've seen the Dolphins' top 2 receivers through 6 games have 1,234 yards. Like, that's insane to me.
Yeah. So on the defensive side of the ball, Paul, before we get to our grades, I realized I didn't answer the question in chat about the defensive back position. You're exactly right. They need somebody. Nick Needham is out for the year with a torn Achilles. What a huge blow. Byron Jones and Mike McDaniel already said today doesn't expect him back this week, and it doesn't sound promising for the rest of the year. But William Jackson, who is a kind of a Sean Smith type cornerback, a 6'3", 200 pounds, isn't doing well in Washington because they play so much zone. You get him opposite Xavier Howard, and it works out with William Jackson. Now you can take the promise you've seen from the other guys, the Keon Cross and the Kader Kohu, who's hopefully going to be back this week too. And Noah Igbenogany, who actually had some good reps out there. You take those and say, okay, you're not going to be our second cornerback. You're going to be our 3rd, 4th, and 5th guy moving forward. Yeah, I think that cornerback position would have some life. I would definitely be on board for William Jackson III.
I'd be on board for William Jackson. I think it would be irresponsible of Greer, even though it's a division rival, to not call and inquire what it would take to pry Bryce Hall away. He's another very good man corner. And then you've still got Kevin King out there that you may be able to sweet talk into coming back this season instead of next season, because he's just basically focusing on getting his body where he wants it to be this season. So those are 3 big options right there. And on top of that, you've got a team like the Panthers where you could shop for, like the chat mentioned, a guy like Moten, or a handful of others on their roster. I do find myself occasionally peeking at some of these depth charts for teams that are pretty much already out of it. Teams like the Commanders, teams like the Panthers. And, there are some intriguing options. And while I don't want to part with much draft capital from next year, right option comes up at the right price. Absolutely.
And Moten and Jackson III are 2 players I would absolutely trade for. And, usually those guys don't come with a 1st or 2nd round price tag here at this point. I mean, you're looking at Robbie Anderson was traded. Robbie Anderson in the 7th rounder were traded for a future 6th rounder. Now I know Moton and Jackson the third, their profiles are higher than that, but I mean, I'd be shocked if definitely a 3rd round pick would land either one, and more than likely a 4th or a 5th rounder. Mm-hmm. You know, that's really the price tag at this time of year. And like I mentioned last week, William Jackson has had more than half of his contract paid for by the Commanders this year. So it wouldn't cost a lot for the Dolphins to roster him this year and next. And again, I think he's a really good fit. But on the defensive side of the ball,
one thing I just want to bring up before you move on, because it's something you said made me go take a peek. Tyreek Hill is still on pace for a ridiculous amount of yards, as is Jalen Waddle. Tyreek Hill is still on pace for 1,986 yards right now, just shy of 2,000 yards. And Jalen Waddle's on pace for 1,500. And that's with 3 games of backup quarterback play, which is crazy to me.
Yeah, and Tyreek Hill, I think he's got 50 catches for he's got some rushing. With rushing and receiving, I think he's at like 710 for the season.
He's at 701 receiving right now.
Gotcha. And I think he's got 9 rushing yards too.
Perfect.
So yeah, it's yeah. And Jalen Waddle rushing and receiving, he's got 550. I mean, what, 550 divided by 6 times 17 games. I mean, let's do some quick math here. If 1,558 yards for the year. Yeah, it's incredible when I look at that this team is 3-3, and it's hopeful for me looking in the next 5 games with the schedule that they have coming up. That, I mean, you've got to go 4-1
and with the this quarterback run. They've got coming up.
But I tell you what, I look at the Steelers game on Sunday night, and I look at the next few games, and I remember back to last year where the Dolphins, they dropped at 1-4 and had a tough schedule. And then I looked at the next 2 games. They were playing the Falcons at home and then the Jaguars in London. And then a whole other laundry list of excuses came up. And then season officially spiraled out of control. I just think that's a more talented team this year, but I don't think it's a disciplined enough team this year either right now. You've had 28 penalties in 3 games. Mm-hmm. We didn't see that from Brian Flores.
No. We didn't see playoffs with Brian Flores.
Yeah, we saw winning seasons, 2 of them, but and we better see that with McDaniel too. And I think we will. I think this roster is too talented to keep going down this way. And they've had hate to say luck, but too much bad luck.
So just a funny stat comparison real quick, just going back to those receivers for a second. Tyreek Hill has 50 catches for 701 yards, averaging 14 yards per reception with a long of 64, and only has 2 touchdowns. River Craycraft, 2 catches for combined less than Tyreek Hill's average per reception, and two touchdowns.
Yeah, and Craycraft also had a 32-yard catch called back, poor guy. If you saw that play, Liam Eichenberg got beat on the play by the Vikings defensive tackle, James Lynch. So Lynch absolutely beat the crap out of Eichenberg at the snap. Skylar Thompson saw it, ran away from it, and then Eichenberg was so mad that he got beat up that he tackled him from behind and eliminated Craycraft going down to the 2-yard line, which at that point, the Dolphins got a 7-0 lead, which would have been pretty important in this type of game. So there is no excuse for Greg Little or Liam Eichenberg to be in the lineup. I mean, if you have Teron Armstead, Robert Jones, Connor Williams, Robert Hunt, and Brandon Shell as your starting 5 next game, I think you have a significantly upgraded offensive line.
Or Taylor Moton.
Moton, yeah, I'd love Moton too. I just don't think that'll happen.
So I don't know. That's a team in disarray right now. They've already fired their head coach.
Yeah, it seems like they're holding on to several guys though. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, Robbie Anderson, they traded. I still think they'll trade McCaffrey. Right now they're saying 2 first-round picks, but that's the game they're playing now. Yeah. So we'll see. I'd love Moten. I'd love
You
William
know,
Jackson the third.
I'd
So
offer them a conditional pair of picks that we turn him into first round picks if he managed to go without landing on IR for a season and a half.
yeah, I think that's a good bet. But before we get to we'll do the grades quickly. But defensively, I mean, the Vikings were 2 for 12 on third down. Kirk Cousins, yeah, the final stat sheet looked pretty good, but I mean, 20 for 29, 175 yards, 47 of those on one rub route to Justin Jefferson. He sat back and basically took what was given to him, and they were willing to punt. And that's what happens too when the other team is making as many mistakes as the Dolphins did. I thought the pressure. I mean, I thought the Vikings would create a lot of time for Kirk Cousins. Not the case. The Dolphins' defensive line had a very good game, provided a lot of pressure when they were given the opportunity to do so. Dalvin Cook, again, the stat line looks pretty 13 for 77 and a touchdown. Take out that ever important 47-yard run, you've got 12 for 20, which is under 2 yards a carry. They did a great job against Dalvin Cook, other than that one play.
Yeah, no, 100%. And it's, we had 3 sacks on the day, including I think one called back on a penalty. But I thought Trey Flowers put some pressure on and nearly got to pay dirt a couple of times. I really am getting frustrated with. I like Josh Boyer a lot. I feel like he forgets how to use Jerome Baker properly for about half a season, and then suddenly remembers in the back half, and things get turned around. Because you remember last year I was getting pissed off at the way they were using Jerome Baker, and then around the time they turned it around, they flipped his role back, and he got Defensive Player of the Month for December. Like it's you already know what works with the guy. Let's start using it.
I wish Jerome Baker would use Jerome Baker a little better too. On that 47-yard run by Dalvin Cook, you'll see Dalvin Cook shaking off Jerome Baker.
Yeah.
I hasn't made a lot of plays. That's an understatement, Baker. But overall, I think he's been solid. I think he covers a lot of ground. I like what I've seen of him more.
And that's why you need him in the middle of the defense, not
yep.
off the edges somewhere.
Yeah, that's very true. I totally agree with that. But yeah, defensively, I mean, Kirk Cousins, 175 yards passing, Dalvin Cook, 77 yards rushing. But you take out the 53-yard or the, I forget if it was 53 or 47. I think 53-yard run by Cook, actually. Whatever it was, you had 2 plays that were for over 100 yards. You take those out of the equation. Vikings did nothing on offense. But then again, those were the plays that ended up winning the game for them by doing that. So it's a shame because I think they played a well-rounded game, but also still no turnovers. 1 turnover for the Dolphins defense in the last 5 games. If they just get a couple here, even 1 in this game, I think it significantly turns the tide.
No, agreed. And one guy I think did enough to win in this game and really try to put Miami in position to win is guest of the show from last week, Thomas Morstead. He had some phenomenal punts in this game. I think he had over 300 yards punting, averaged north of 50 yards again in this game, and really is enjoying a career year.
They need to get somebody faster on special teams to get down there quicker. Because he's booming the ball out of the building. And some special teams gurus would completely disagree with that strategy. I'm fine with it after watching Matt Hawk trying to pin people or pin the ball, which would sometimes work, but sometimes lead to a 25-yard punt. Morstead, I'd rather have somebody that if you punt the ball from the 25, you're going to see that returner drifting back to the 15, and then it's up to your gunners to get there. Because even with a big return, like we saw from Jalen Reagor, he gets up to midfield. That's still a net of, 25 to 30 on what looks like a complete train wreck of a play. Well, Matt Hawk would have just made a 25 or 30-yard punt. So what's the difference on that? And you get a lot of long punts. Yeah, Morstead is the only thing going well on special teams right now, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I did not like Tyreek returning again. It feels like he tries to make too much happen when there's nothing there, when he's on special teams anyway.
Well, at least he doesn't drop the ball like Javon Holland did in this game.
Mm-hmm.
You have Holland has no business fielding those two punts that he had. The one was, I mean, come on, like you've got somebody who is just bearing down on you, forces the fumble. You're lucky you got that back, and then at the end of the game, he does field the punt and runs it for 2 yards up to the sideline. You know, just worse things can happen on that.
No, I can't even begin to argue with that one.
So let's get to our grades real quick. Quarterback, I'm going to kick it to you first on quarterback.
I would probably give Skylar Thompson a C+ here, maybe a B- considering that he's a 7th round rookie starting his first game. But I thought Teddy Bridgewater was borderline atrocious, even though he did have the 2 touchdown passes and threw for 300 yards in this game. There were a lot of opportunities to take advantage of, and he didn't. There was a lot of times where he didn't adjust the protections like he should have. There were a lot of times he showed zero pocket awareness. And I'm over the Teddy Bridgewater experiment. So I am going to go with a D+ at the quarterback position.
Yeah, you and I are on completely different planets with this because I'm going with a B for the quarterbacks. And it probably would have been an A if the Dolphins if Jalen Waddle, probably an A- if Jalen Waddle ends up hanging on to that ball. I mean, 418 passing yards and another 60 something that should have been that were called back by penalties. And yeah, Bridgewater, I don't agree that the reason why the quarterbacks got shellacked overall was because of Bridgewater. I thought Greg Little got thrown around. He and Eichenberg could not pick up stunts together.
Oh, it's not the only reason, but
yeah, and there were a couple of plays where Bridgewater created problems for himself. But I also look too at the 3 turnovers the Dolphins had. One of them was the fumble by Waddle. Another one, it was an interception by Bridgewater, but he put it right where it needed to be, and it bounced off Waddle's shoulder. And then you had another play a bad interception. Patrick Peterson picked it off when the Dolphins were already down 2 touchdowns. You're just trying to make something happen. So I have no problem giving a B for the quarterback position. Skylar Thompson, I think we got something with him.
I finally figured out my comparison in my head. It's like a fancier, cares slightly more Jay Cutler watching Teddy Bridgewater on that field.
Yeah, I don't care for his demeanor a lot. I felt like there was just a flat out lack of energy when he came into the game.
It feels like he doesn't give a damn.
But that's kind of his personality though too. Like
which matches perfectly with my Jay Cutler comparison.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Now, if Teddy Bridgewater finishes the game 350 yards passing, 3 touchdowns and an interception, which might have happened if not for the Waddle fumble, people will be looking at him like he's poised.
No,
not that he's lifeless.
I can't say I'd be thinking he's poised because I was tweeting out during the game about how little pocket awareness it felt like he had. So I can't.
He picked up that pocket awareness as the game went on, and
a little bit, but I don't know.
I'd say a lot bit, given he threw for 330 yards.
I'm actually giving, for once, I'm not just giving the sunshine of the second half. I'm giving, the whole game. It's just, did he show a little bit in the fourth quarter when the Vikings had it locked? Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. Running back, a lot was made of the Dolphins really completely abandoning the running game. I'm not as harsh on that. I mean, I thought Teddy was humming, and when the Dolphins did attempt to run, there weren't a lot of holes there. I mean, overall for the game, 16 carries for 52 yards from Mostert and Chase Edmonds. I'm not completely shocked given the state of the Dolphins' offensive line. They had a lot more success earlier in the game. Mostert had that big 16-yard run, which, accounted for most of the stats here on the drive where you had 5 penalties, which what a shame. But yeah, not much to speak of for the running backs. I'm just going to give them a C.
Yeah, I'm with you on the C, and it feels wrong to lump Chase Edmonds in with Raheem Mostert in this game. It's
Yeah,
Chase
you're right.
Edmonds, it looks bad running the ball right now. He's decent in the receiving game, but he looks bad running the ball. I think if Alec Ingold had one more carry and matched him on the 2 carries, Ingold would have had more yardage. Like,
Yeah,
it's brutal.
I think Edmonds is strictly. I mean, I'd say he's strictly useful in the passing game, but he drops the ball too. So he did
it's
catch.
telling that Gaskin is starting to get carries.
It is, and I never understood just immediate interest. We need to get this guy Chase Edmonds 2 years, making $6 million a year, and that's another problem here. Is you've got Chase Edmonds making $6 million a year, Cedric Wilson making $8 million a year. Eric Ezekama, 4th-round star in training camp, but can't get on the field. I mean, it's odd to me. You've got 3 or 4 players on this offense where it's appalling that Trent Sherfield and River Craycraft are the 3rd and 4th options here at the receiving corps.
I am not as appalled watching the way Sherfield has played recently. There were some really good moments for him, including in this game, I thought.
One catch for 6 yards.
On that one catch, he looked good. And wasn't there another one called back?
Yeah, there was. There was a big one called back. And he's a good player. He's a good backup. But I look at that and I look at the things that Ezekama did in preseason and Chase Edmonds and Cedric Wilson did for the Cowboys last year. I'm like, it's a shame that they just can't learn it. I don't know. I don't know.
No, there was a really good big answer from Wes Welker on why Easy hasn't been on the field yet in a regular season game. And it was a well thought out answer in the way to develop him and how wide receiver is one of the hardest positions, especially in this offense, to get into the lineup without having to sweat what they do. And they're teaching him everything about all of the spots on the field, the entire route tree, when to run what. And, we've seen miscommunications with experienced players thus far. And so I'm willing to wait a little bit longer before I start worrying about Ezekama not getting out there, especially since we've got Gesicki waking up, Sherfield looking good when he gets a chance. And let's face it, we've got Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill on pace for 3,500 yards combined between the two of them right now. So, yeah, I'm good.
Yeah. So receivers, what would you rank what they did in this game here?
It feels weird to give anything below an A when you had Gesicki with 6 catches and 2 touchdowns, Waddle and Hill combining for 18 catches for 300 plus yards, and to give anything less than an A. But there was the critical drop by Waddle. There was the critical fumble by Waddle. I'm going to give them a B plus, but it feels ridiculous to do so.
You took the words right out of my mouth. I could go B that I had in mind. I'll go with the B plus too, just because there were, again, Hill and Waddle combined for 306 yards. To put that in perspective, 4 passing games yesterday had over 306 yards. The Patriots, the Colts, the Patriots with Bailey Zappi, the Colts with Matt Ryan, the Bills with Josh Allen, and the Chiefs with Pat Mahomes. 4 teams out of 32 had as much as Hill and Waddle, not the passing game, Hill and Waddle. These guys are wide open on every play. And that's the exciting thing about the rest of the year. But you've got to keep this. The offensive line have to keep these plays blocked up, and you've got to get Tua back and protect him. I think the Dolphins could still be dangerous and snap right back into it if that's the case. So we'll see. Gesicki 6 for 69 and 2 touchdowns. I hope the Dolphins continue to use him more than Durham Smythe. I know Smythe fits the offense better. He didn't play in this game, but Gesicki, Hill, and Waddle together, that's the best alignment. It's the most productive alignment on the field. And we got to see more of that. Offensive line, I think I've talked about it enough. Greg Little should be probably arrested for how he played in this game. Liam Eichenberg, PFF gave him a 71 grade, which is like a pretty above average grade. I don't get that. Who had the assignment for that? I think anytime there was a Little or Eichenberg miscommunication, PFF just blamed Little. But neither one of those are good enough, and they're just some embarrassing reps from both of them. And on another play too, you could say it's offensive line, it's tight end, whatever, but just right off the snap, Hunter Long and Greg Little just run into each other. I don't even know how that happens. And then Zadarius Smith just runs untouched around the edge on an important play, sacks Teddy Bridgewater. But Greg Little and Eichenberg dragged this game grade down significantly. Williams and Hunter still good players, but had 3 penalties. Brandon Shell had a few pressures, but I hope they keep him starting there at right tackle, even with Austin Jackson in there. But to me, they ruined the game. It's a D.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. What about the D line for you? And actually, real quick, before we move to that, when people want to doom and gloom it right now, I'm going to ask you this, Kat. What was the Dolphins' record after week 8 last year?
They were 1-7.
Yeah. So,
and then they came back against a weak schedule, and that's kind of what we're looking at here.
Well, they also shifted their defense to the proper defense and started making adjustments at that point in time instead of doing all the goofiness that they did the first half of the year.
Yeah, and I don't have a problem with the defense, and we'll talk about that. I mean, I think this is a defense that's been very reliant on cornerbacks, and that's been a shame. At one point, you had, during the game, you've got Xavier Howard playing hurt, but more healthy than he has in a long time. You've got Byron Jones out, probably isn't going to, in my opinion, won't play this year. That's just a guess. Nick Needham's out for the year. Kader Coe, who's been your, darling here on the entire team, who's gotten a lot of snaps, didn't play with an oblique injury. Hopefully he comes back. Keon Crossan left the game. You're down to Justin Bethel and Noah Igbenogany, and they got on the field and played pretty well, shockingly. They're not, the cornerbacks are not the reason the Dolphins lost the game. But let's start out at the defensive line. We'll go defensive line, linebacker, and defensive back here this week, Paul, instead of front seven. I'm going to go with an A- for this group. I mean, Jalen Phillips had a big test against Christian Darrisaw. I thought he passed that. I thought he was very active in the backfield. He had a sack as well. And even when he's not, in the backfield, I feel like he's very active out there on the edge. Thought he had a really good game. Christian Wilkins, phenomenal. And after that, what play was? I think it was the fake punt play when the Dolphins were down by a touchdown. The next play, you had an end around to Justin Jefferson. Christian Wilkins tackles Justin Jefferson in the open field for a 5-yard loss. Next play, Christian Wilkinson throws the guard out of the way, stops Dalvin Cook for a 2-yard loss. Then next play, the Vikings get a penalty, and after starting in field goal range, they're punting the football on 4th and 22. That's how Christian Wilkins can ruin a play like he did here. So kudos to him just for that. Zach Sealer forced a fumble that the Dolphins didn't recover because they're not forcing turnovers. Ogba's still silent, but I thought had the best game, had his best game of the year probably, and that's not saying much for him right now. Melvin Ingram I thought was pretty quiet, but overall, stopped the run except for one play and created pressure. A- for me.
I can go with an A- as well for a lot of the reasons you mentioned. It's Christian Wilkins continues to excel right now. Zach Sealer is a monster, and Jalen Phillips is starting to get a little comfy in the offense or in the defense, which is a good thing to see here. Emmanuel Ogba, he continues to do a lot of things that don't pack the stat sheet right now, but I think those stats are coming. And Raekwon Davis continues to quietly have a very good season. I mean, he got a sack in this game. Didn't Christian Wilkins have one called back here on a face mask, or was that last week?
I'm not. Raekwon Davis had one called back last week.
I thought Christian Wilkins had one this week, but again, I
he
could be
might
wrong.
have.
It's the front four continues though to wreak havoc, and I love it. I absolutely love it.
Me too. And linebackers here. Landon Roberts, a sack and a half. Jerome Baker, not one of his better games. Andrew Van Ginkel, has gotten more reps. I'm not quite sure what he does on the field when he's not flying off the edge, creating pressure. The major play, the Dalvin Cook long touchdown run, really split Baker and Landon Roberts. Not a good play for either of them, but this team, Landon Roberts has been a huge surprise. This team in this run defense has teeth, and I give him most of the credit for that. So I'm just going to go. I'm sure I'm missing a play somewhere around here, but I'm just going to go with a B.
I am going to piggyback off of what I said earlier. I think they're playing Jerome Baker out of position right now. There were too many plays where I saw him lined up not only too far outside for my taste for what he does well, but also almost up at the line of scrimmage to the outside, which really limits his range, which is one of his huge advantages with his speed. On top of that, I like him being towards the middle of the defense because as much as Landon Roberts can affect things with the blitz, Jerome Baker is just phenomenal blitzing. And I think they continue to play him out of position here, which is a shame. Melvin Ingram wound up in coverage far too many times, and that is not an arrow that he has in his quiver, in my opinion. But again, Landon Roberts has been a breath of fresh air for somebody I didn't expect to be. So yep. I can go with the way they limited the run game in the sack and a half by Landon Roberts. I can go with a B here, but I think if you start utilizing these guys properly again, I mean, if you want to take Melvin Ingram and Jerome Baker and swap the way that you're playing them right now, I think they'll both be better players.
I think Baker should be blitzing more because Roberts is blitzing a lot. I think part of that look too is that when Roberts blitzes, it's on a play where, hey, they might come with a run inside, and now they're not as likely to do that if Baker's there because Landon Roberts has shown the ability to fight through and stop the run. So they're like, well, while you're doing that, why don't you blitz too? I think that's where it's really coming from. But yeah, I think that's causing problems with Baker at least. Defensive back. Yeah, I mean, we've talked about it. Justin Jefferson, we can't ignore that he had 170 yards receiving, 47 of them on one play, and another 20 something on another, where the Dolphins basically sent the house and somebody blew an assignment. But that can't be ignored. Other than that, there's nothing. I mean, other than those two plays, there's nothing. Adam Thielen, 4 catches, 36 yards. And Jefferson had those 2 big catches. KJ Osborne was pretty silent. Irv Smith had a touchdown catch, but a 1-yard touchdown. Pretty silent other than that. 175 yards passing from Kirk Cousins. On a day like this where the Dolphins had so many injuries to their cornerbacks, you would have thought there would have been more. So, no, I mean, I don't blame the defense a lot for what's happened. So I gave the defensive line a B+. I gave linebackers a B. I got to give the defensive backs a B+.
Yeah, I mean, Xavier Howard got beat a couple of times, but at the end of the day, the Vikings came in with the NFL's leading receiver in Justin Jefferson, and Miami did limit him to 106 yards while having 2 receivers on their own side of the field outdo him on the stat lines, and including, and it's funny, it didn't really occur to me till you just said it out loud. Tyreek Hill had more receiving yards than Kirk Cousins had passing yards in this game. And
yeah. It's a shame. It's really a shame when you put it like that. And
But Byron Jones is not expected to return this week. Hopefully, we get Cater Kohu back. I do like him opposite Xavier Howard for now. I haven't seen the full timeline on Nick Needham. I apologize.
He's out for the year. He
is
tore his
out for the year.
Achilles.
Okay.
Yeah, he tore his Achilles.
I thought so, but I didn't want to say so out of turn if I was not correct on that one. But again, it's hopefully we get Byron back in a few weeks. I mean, we will see. It feels like it's starting to be a week to week question now instead of, I will see next month type of question. So that's a good thing. Because once we get Byron Jones back and we get X the rest of the way healthy, this is the most formidable cornerback tandem in the NFL, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it is. And unfortunately, I don't have a good feeling about Byron Jones that, we're expecting him. I mean, let's be honest. We're expecting him back in mini camp. Didn't come back in money camp. Didn't come back in training camp. Wasn't available for preseason. Then, not surprisingly, I guess goes on PUP. And we were really expecting him back after 4 games. And all McDaniel has said is his foot has not healed the way that we thought it would. That's challenging for that. Yeah. So, Paul, special teams, let's run through this. Then our player of the game and Coke Bus player. Special teams, I mean, we're pointing out mistakes every week. You have the field goal by Jason Sanders that's missed. And look, it's not a chip shot for 50-yarders, but it's this guy went from in 2020, he can't miss to, he's like 2 for his last 11 from 50 plus. And that snap, it's 80, it's 85 degrees on a Miami day with no wind. And the snap is good. The hold is good. You kick it and it's 30 yards off to the right. I mean, that's not what the Dolphins are paying for in a 5-year, $22 million contract. Morstead outkicks his coverage from time to time, but as a boomer for lag, I think he's the best partner the Dolphins have had since Brandon Fields. They let up a long punt return, Rager back to the 50, but so overall, I don't think it quite evened out. I'm going to go with a C- for special teams.
Yeah, I'll go with a C here for a lot of the reasons you mentioned. Sanders is slowly getting to be something where I'm starting to look at potential free agent NFL kickers right now, which is a weird place to be this, in week 6. But after last season, after this season, maybe it's not the holder.
I'm with you on that. And also the biggest play that I can't forget is Clayton Fedulum.
I blocked it out.
And look, he made a good play initially. He bounced it to, he's supposed to run up the middle, bounce it to the outside. And Alec Ingold was supposed to be his blocker. He gets punked up front. And because of that, he can't get to the second guy. Fedulum runs around the edge. He has this great move and he regains his footing. And all he has to do is jump with the ball out for the first down. And he drops the ball.
Or even have the ball in his hands.
Yeah, he doesn't even have the ball in his hands. Shame. But I'm pretty sure that was a play Christian Wilkins came back and ruined the next drive for the Vikings. So it evened out. But still, talking about 3-4 mistakes every week from special teams, can't have that. Paul, who is your player of the game and your Coke Bus player while we wrap up here?
My player of the game here and my Coke Bus player. I'm going to Coke Bus it first, and I'm going to go with none other than Mr. Greg Little in this game. There were several options to choose from, unfortunately, but Greg Little was atrocious. He fooled me for a couple of weeks here into starting to be a believer, but I'm not anymore again. And as far as my player of the game, I will give it to somebody I haven't given it to in a long time. I will give it to Christian Wilkins. I really like the effect he had, even more so than his stat line.
Yeah, and if my headlight just went out there, so it means it's time to go. So we'll wrap this up quick. But yeah, my player of the game, I'll go my Coke Bus player of the game first too. You said Little. I've got to go with Jalen Waddle again, and the reason for that is even though he had 120 something yards, to me he had the two plays of the game that as a star player you've got to make and or not make. And he was a reason for one interception that took 3 points off the board. And then the Dolphins overcame that. And on a 3rd and 15, gets open, catches the pass, fumbles it. Dolphins never recover from that. So yeah. My player of the game, I'm really want to kind of go in a different way from, because look, I'm not going to, I really don't want to just keep giving it to Tyreek Hill every week. Because
that's what happens when you're on pace for 2,000 yards.
Yeah, I think it gets boring after a while. I'm going to give it to Mike Gesicki. 6 catches, 69 yards, 2 touchdowns. I thought he was a major mismatch problem in this game, and I hope the Dolphins realize that moving forward. I'm just getting to the point where I'm starting to think maybe you just need to abandon the running game earlier in the game and just put those 3 guys out there, because it worked against the Ravens in the 4th quarter. It worked in this game when the Vikings defense was gassed. I thought I was so confident before that fumble the Dolphins were going to win this game because they could not stay with our receivers at all. And the Dolphins were just throwing. What a shame. But the Dolphins are going to play on Sunday night against the Steelers, and that's going to do it for our breakdown of the Dolphins' loss
real
over the
quick,
Vikings. Paul, good.
Two things I want to bring up from the chat before we sign off here. Grandy, you mentioned that Morstead wears Reggie Roby's old jersey. I think we talked about it on the air instead of off the air, but I think we actually talked about that when he was on the show last week. So if you get a chance, go check that episode out, because we also talked about the league's new concussion protocols, what it's like with Mike McDaniel in the locker room right now, and a few other topics. And then CCRR brought up Dieter needs to go in at left guard. And as much as I like Robert Jones, I wouldn't hate that move as far as Dieter goes. What are you?
I agree. And I'm starting to ask, if Dieter and Jones can't help right now, what are they doing? Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't know why Eichenberg and has earned anything. And here's a bone I've got to pick before we leave too. It looks even creepier with the light off now. So I'm going to get really dark about this. Is Austin Jackson, I've never seen a player benefit more from an injury. Like, people have been like rubbing their hands together about Austin Jackson returning. Has everybody lost their mind? Have you forgot how terrible this guy is? I mean, this is somebody I never wanted to see play again for the Dolphins. And hey, he had a few glimpses in his first game, but still had some whiffs too, as usual. Like this, I'll take Brandon Shell any day over what Austin Jackson has ever shown.
Well, here's a thought for you. What about this offensive line? And I said that very Forrest Gump-like. Teron Armstead at left tackle, Connor Williams at center, Dieter at left guard, Robert Jones at right guard, and Robert Hunt at right tackle.
I mean, I've always been an advocate for Hunt at right guard. At right tackle, just like you have been. I would be interested for a week in not rushing that and seeing if Brandon Shell can play at the same level he did last game. And it wasn't a great level. I'm not asking for a great level. I'm asking for a guy. He was okay. And that's Jesse Davis, Austin Jackson, Greg Little. These guys were not okay. They were the worst in the sport at what they do. And they're continuing to be that way. And Greg Little is the worst out of all of them.
Didn't Little have like a 1.5 PFF grade?
Yeah. And again, you take PFF for what it's worth. When they have a 1.5 out of 100, and there is just, you could put just clown music on the background of this guy trying to block anybody. He ran into Liam Eichenberg for 1 sack, and he ran into Hunter Long for another one. And then got thrown around on top of it to where the announcers coldly said it's abuse on this last. Yeah. Get him out of there.
Well, I put him on the Coke bus, so.
Good. Yeah, you did. Attaboy. All right, that's going to do it for our breakdown of the Dolphins' loss here to the Vikings. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, all of our social media outlets, as well as the fan-sided network and finfanatic.com. And if it's not on the right side and it's not on the left side,